what you experience isn't normal. I don't ever want you to think that's normal. I don't think you can actually form healthy friendships with your children until that's decided. So many more people will be impacted if they stay the course and do the hard work. You call that value to the world while you're here. That's bigger than just you and yourself.
Welcome back to another episode of the New Rules Podcast. It's your girl, Breezy, and I am here with Mr. Christopher Crawford. How you doing today, sir?
Dude, just using my government name
Every now and then
crazy.
You gotta drop that in there so that people know.
Nah, man, they don't
Your
need to know
origin
that.
Story.
Nope, don't need to know that. Got to keep that anonymous sometimes. You know what I'm saying? Got to move in silence.
Oh, okay.
So what's happening, Bree? How you doing today?
I'm doing well. We've got big things coming up. It's Thanksgiving week.
It is Thanksgiving week. Got a lot of planning for 2025, which sounds crazy to say 2025.
It really does. This year flew by.
It is. Well, just saying 2025, I'm thinking like, when I was younger, I thought we'd be in flying cars and, like the TV show The Jetsons, have machines that like just, change your clothes, you go in, put the new outfit on, get out. But no, right now all we got is, I don't know what, Twitter,
ChatGPT,
and X. That's my creativity's gone to, So anyway, are you? What are you doing for Thanksgiving?
For Thanksgiving, I'm going back to my genesis, my origin story. Bartow, Florida.
Which if you're ever driving, you go to Bartow, Florida, you have to stop at Fred's.
Go to Lakeland. It's nearby. I'm sure you've heard of it.
Yes, it's called Fred's Southern
It's a
Food
buffet.
I've been there one time, and it was just so memorable. And so, yeah, if you're ever in that area, slide through. I'm telling you, but make sure you're not sliding through the drive. Wherever you're going, slide through, and hopefully you're heading
Keep it going.
Hopefully you're heading to a hotel or a home so you can sleep for the next 3
That's
hours
true.
after you eat that. But don't go on a long drive.
What are you doing for Thanksgiving?
Actually, I am staying here. Wendy and our girls are going to Miami, to her family from Jamaica. They're all going to meet down there. But because Jalen's playing here, he only has like a day.
Here being Tallahassee,
Yeah.
Jalen's son plays at
Jalen's son?
Sorry.
That's great.
No. Christopher's son, Jalen, plays for Florida State University men's basketball.
Yeah, so they only have they play tonight and then they have like a day or two off. So we're just gonna stay here and then we're gonna hang out with like their godfather, really their godparents. So we're gonna go hang out over there, me and him. So yeah. So it's the first time we'll kind of be like split up, but it's it's kind of the new life that we're in right now. Just because again with kids being a little bit everywhere and stuff like that, and they're having to go down there because when the grandfather is getting up there in age, and so you don't know how many like more Thanksgivings they're gonna have. So they're gonna all go do that. So. Yeah, so anyway, but I was supposed to be, another reason too, like driving now 8 hours to go down there. I'm like, that's not happening. And then I was supposed to be in California, but then unfortunately I wasn't able to go. So just a lot of mix up in like, plans and stuff like that. So, but I'm excited. You'll be able to hang out, chill out for the next few days. So
You have children, a son who is in college for the first time.
Yep.
A daughter who graduates high school within the next year, 2025.
Yep.
How's it feeling?
It's funny. We had friends over at our house last night, and they both have daughters. They all went to they were on the same grade. Went to school with Brooklyn, our middle child, who's going to be graduating, and so they're all at different schools now. But like we're sitting there just talking. And we're like, and one of the parents brought up the fact of like graduation, and they're just talking. I'm like, and it just hit all of us sitting there. We're like, oh man, that's like 6 months away, and it was just like. I'm like, oh my goodness, we got 6 months for like that's gonna be happy. You know what I mean? Because we went through it last year with Jalen, and for whatever reason, I'm like, oh yeah, like that's like next year. Meaning like the end of 2025. I'm like, oh no, it's 6 months away. So I think it's just getting used to like it's going to be like different. You know what I mean? Depending on where Brooklyn decides to go to school. She could go to Florida State. She thinks she's gonna stay in state, but could be at Florida State. So if she stays here, that's great and whatever. But it's just different. You know what I mean? Like Jalen, for 18, 19 years living at home, and now he's on his own. And so it's like I still get to see him a lot, but again, not having that in Brooklyn being also then literally it's just Peyton, and so which is she's gonna have like the third child.
She's a star.
Yeah, the third child's always like, oh, I feel like I'm being left out, and you're like, all right, well, trust me, you're not gonna be left out.
Your time's coming.
Your time's coming where you're gonna get sick of us. So but no, I think that it's actually there's parts of it that's sad, you know what I mean? Because it really does. People say things happen really fast. It does, but there's also parts of it where I'm really excited because I think that there's just a different level, different relationship I get to have with my kids now, and getting to experience that more and more. So I think that part's like really, really fun. Yeah.
What are the key differences in fathering a daughter and fathering a son?
Yeah, fathering I remember hearing Will Smith say this one time. It's like fathering a son. It's like sometimes you can just look at him and just be like, dude, like honestly, be like, yo, shut up before I punch you. And he'll just kind of like get in line. You can't do that with a daughter. You know what I mean? Like you gotta like walk through all that. You gotta listen, go through it. But for mine, they're all just their temperaments are all different. You know what I mean? Jalen sees the world like glass half full in almost everything he does. You know what I mean? So a lot of times for me, it's like constantly helping him be reminded of reality. Brooklyn is a little bit like me where it's like glass half empty. So it's like, trying to make sure she doesn't go to doom and destruction. So it's like, but they have different temperaments. But at the end of the day, I think that what I've learned with having a daughter is that like the ability to sit with them and listen and things like that. And nothing will break your heart more than like, being with your daughter and like watching your daughter, like being with them and crying, you know what I mean? But also like, my son, having a situation with him to where he happened to be at a football game. I was thinking about the stories at a football game and as they're at a football game, all of a sudden they started like, unfortunately they started shooting at the football game. And so he comes home and, and I could look where he felt, trouble. And I'll never forget this moment where he started, like he came to, like, he was there and I could look at him like, dude, are you okay? Because I knew he wasn't, but he was trying to like, whatever. And then all of a sudden he gets there and he just like started crying. And then he was like, but then he started like apologizing to me. I'm like, what are you apologizing for? He was just like, I need to, I know I need to be tougher. And but I'm like, and there's those moments where I had to like, I wish you things you wish you would have had when you was a kid, but I stopped him like, no, dude, like what you experience isn't normal. I don't ever want you to think that's normal. Like, unfortunately, I grew up with that was normal, where you become callous to it. I was like, I don't want you to ever feel like that's normal. And so it's just like I say all I have to say. It's just like they're just all different moments, different times, and they need things at different, like in different seasons. And you just have to be very present, aware. And sometimes you do it well, sometimes you don't. I think as they get older, one thing I will tell you about having a daughter that's cool is that she's very aware. And so it's like she has like, she'll talk to me now about like what she like sees for me. Like, Dad, why are you still doing this? What do you think about doing this? So that part's been really cool.
I'm actually glad you brought that up. The next question I was going to ask you was, what has it been like from transitioning from in the beginning? Your like main role is like, I am taking care of you. I'm trying to understand more of who you are, who you've been made to be, reveal that to you. And then you start to have this little bit of a transition where they start to want to understand you a little bit more. And the relationship starts to, at times, have more of a friendship component to it. What has that been like for you?
Yeah, it's actually probably one of my favorite parts of being like a dad. Because I think what happens is I think everything happens in seasons. I'm just, and maybe it's because I've been like studying this a lot lately, but I just really believe in time and seasons, and I think a lot of times we don't understand that. So for example, we'll hear about being a parent and man, you want your kids to be your friends, right? And you want them to be able to come and talk to you about whatever, but I think sometimes it's time and season. I think the first, and this will get to your questions, that early on, like what had to be established was like that I was their parent, I was their dad, and I was the authority figure. I don't think you can actually form healthy friendships with your children until that's decided. I think a lot of times parents try to do that too early, and their kids have to understand, no, there are like lines, there's authority, there's whatever, and then it morphs into that. And so watching my kids morph into that now, you know what I mean, and their own personality, things like that has been really cool because they ask probing questions. And the other thing that's been cool, I can now ask them, what is it like being like our kid? Like, what do we do well? What don't we do well? what do you notice? What do you see? What do you wish we would have done better? Because this still helps you get better as a human. You know what I mean? Because people who literally, outside of Wendy, who like they're with me all the time, they see all this stuff, and their ability to be able to communicate that, say that. And so it's a very interesting dynamic to kind of like walk through that, and then being able to walk through that in their current cultural moment, you know what I mean? To where, like, you know, my youngest is like, you know, she's growing up in the era of like, you know, man, everybody talks about, man, like, you know, my voice, my whatever, and, you know, and sometimes I'm like, and I'll have to look at her, I'm like, yeah, sometimes your voice and what you say, it's not very good right now. Like, I just have to say that to her, not because what I don't want to do is kill that you do have like a voice to advocate for yourself, but that does not mean that whatever you're saying is always right. But then as a parent, I have to be able to notice, like, man, am I just, my anxiety sometimes, am I like over like communicating, over talking? Am I trying to, you know, like, I'm trying to alleviate my anxiety, so I just want to like give her an answer quick instead of like letting her talk and process that. So again, all that being said, it's just a lot, but I mean, it is a very, it's a really cool season. It's difficult because you have just all these different dynamics, because you now have your kids, they can make life altering decisions. And so like, you hope, you know, you get to see like did the stuff work at all? So
How have they expressed what it's like to be your kid?
For them, it's that as much as we have worked hard not to put like pressure on them, they do feel pressure. I think they feel pressure just because of, especially the city we live in. You know, I play basketball here. You know, me and Wendy have been able to, you know, fortunate enough to build some things that have had some like relatively like impact. So being in Tallahassee, people know who their parents are. So they naturally going to feel pressure to be that, you know what I mean? They are naturally going to feel like they have to be a certain thing. And then on top of that, you add outside the business context of being a pastor, that adds another thing. And one of the things that we worked really hard was that we're not trying to make our kids, the more of our kids' behavior toward what we like, you know, toward a certain way of behavior. Like, you know, oh, well, you're a pastor's kid, so you do that. That's why you always hear you hear the horror stories of pastor's kids wilding out, because a lot of times what ends up happening, the pressure of a job will get people to curb their kids' behavior. And one of the things that we said, we're like, they're going to have to figure it out. And I say it to our church all the time, like, yeah, my kids are figuring out Jesus the way you're figuring it out. And so I can't, you know, we're not going to curb their behavior. You're going to watch them grow up. You're going to watch their sanctification process. You're going to see good things, bad things, whatever. But in the end, what I have to do is just look at like, just kind of what we want to see accomplished. And at the end of the day, for us, it's like, man, we want them to have this loving, thriving, growing relationship with God. But at the end of the day, it's got to be like they have to walk in that. That can't be, our thing. And so I think they feel pressure there. I also think they feel thankful, and they feel like they have like privilege. You know, I mean, Brooklyn tells me a lot. You know, she's like, just being around watching you and mom versus like some of her friends and their families or whatever. She's like, it's just kind of like different. You know what I mean? The fact of like how we operate, the things we do, how we communicate, so on and so forth. I think they realize they have a lot of privilege of like just access and things that they have. I think like Jalen one time, like recently, like text me that, you know, he's just like, I really appreciate you for all you've done and giving me an opportunity to do the things I'm doing now. So I think they understand that part as well. And I also think too, with us, I think there is like, you know, they feel pressure, they feel privilege. And then I think they feel an expectation to do something with their life. You know, I mean, you know, I used to tell people when I like talk to my kids or I pray for my kids, I would like pray, like, and then like in the same time, like they call it pray prophesy, like where I would pray for them, but I would speak to who I believe that God had made them to be. So I think they understand that there's something they're called to do. You know, we talk to our kids all the time, you're called to add value to the world while you're here. That's bigger than just you and yourself. So I think those are a few things. I think it's like being our kids. So
What do you fear for their future?
It's a great question. I think what I fear for them is that what I fear for a lot of this generation is that will they have the resilience and toughness to navigate life? because they're growing up in a different world. They're all going to be hitting their adult life in the age of AI and machine learning, in an age where, we are living in like a global shift. So there's going to be, wars and rumors of wars. Who knows what happens economically? With just the continual political kind of like division, what does that look like? I think that like, will they have the resilience? And a lot of it's becoming like, will they have the ability to cut off access points in their life, to know what they do well, to be able to believe that and walk in that? So I worry about that, the resilience factor of it. Honestly, that's probably my biggest thing.
You have done, an incredible work within your lifetime of authentic emotionality. So working through your emotions, focusing on purpose and calling, and building the internal structures needed for you to accomplish that. And there has been, because of your heightened emotionality, such a strong awareness of generational patterns that come with, being a Crawford, what it means like to not replicate them. And I think at some level we all feel that pressure and have a level of that awareness. Is there any patterns that you're just like, realistically, I'm not going to get to that, and that one's going to be on them to figure out how to navigate?
Yeah, they're going to have to navigate the ups and downs of emotions. It's just in like the Crawford genetics of like, we're very high emotionally and we can be very low emotionally. And I think we've given them tools to learn how to navigate that. Things I've had to learn like in my 30s of really how to navigate the highs and lows. So I think they have like the tools and the things to be equipped to do it, but they still have to walk through it. You know what I mean? It's like you can give everyone all the tools, everything they need to, if you're going on a journey and man, this is all you need to survive, but like you still got to use the tools and everything that you have. And so I think that's going to be the biggest thing, because they're going to have highs, they're going to have lows. And a lot of times I think today is that emotionality, there's a couple different things that happen. Either everybody wants you to be even keel, or everybody wants you just to, it's kind of like however you want to be, you just be, you know what I'm saying? And I think that that's one of those deals to where I don't want them to be afraid. I think for so long I was and even like until probably, and I still have to work through this, like afraid of my emotionality. Like at the end of the day, I have like big emotions. I think my big emotions come out when I'm sometimes communicating to people that actually can motivate and inspire people. I also have big emotions that can be very volatile, you know what I mean? In the sense of like, where when I'm bothered or I'm upset about something, like, that I'm bothered or upset about it. And I used to always be afraid of that, where it's like, no, this is just kind of how I'm wired, I try, okay, like let me think through this, let me do this. And what I've learned is like, it's not about the big emotion. Now you have to be mindful. Like I'm not trying to like just spaz on people, but also the biggest issue always used to be for me, how quick can you recover? The biggest issue emotionally, and that's what I'm trying to talk to them about. You're going to have moments, big emotions, whatever. You're going to have moments where things hurt you. You're going to be mad, angry. But the question is that, do you know why it happened? And because when you can understand why it happened, you can recover faster. Instead of it being like, man, I was frustrated and pissed off about this situation. Now it lasts for like 4 weeks. And I'm not talking to anybody. I'm doing this. I'm avoiding these people, imaginary arguments, versus now like, no, that only lasts for like an hour. That's what you want to get to. So I think that, anyway, that's a long way to say, I think for them, it's just learning how to navigate all that stuff like that.
How often in the high highs and the low lows do you find yourself thinking about the end? I don't mean that in like a morbid way, but how often do you find yourself contemplating like the end of your life, the end of, whatever empires you've started?
Yeah. I think about it more now. Because, you're at this age to where, man, you have people who like you went to college with who die. You start to realize like, man, you're approaching, like a lot of times people think like 50 is kind of like, oh, you're approaching like halftime, right? Whatever. But like, I think that, I think about it a lot more now. I think about time matters a lot. I want to do exactly what I'm supposed to do. And so, I think one of those moments I'm constantly thinking about, but I think more than anything else, I was on the phone yesterday with a young guy, who I've helped and mentored or whatever. And the one thing he asked me, he's like, what do you, he's like, you could just keep doing some of the stuff you're doing, but I hear you talk about, man, like how are you investing some of the new ventures you're doing? It's really about helping those who can to where like you're giving them access. And I just told him, I was like, at the end of my life, man, the most important thing I'm going after right now is influence. Because I think if you have influence, influence allows you to have like impact in other people's lives if you use it well. To where now I've got influence to get other people other opportunities. So that's what I'm going after right now. You know, you think about it in my life, I want influence. I think the mark of a human is not so much how much money you acquire. It's going to be how many people are at your funeral. Like how many people actually like can they look and say, oh man, like this person touched me, like this touched my life, this impacted my life, this person did this, he did this or whatever. And that's what I really want to do, because I want to be able to say, man, I helped humanity in whatever area I was given. I helped humanity get better. And so, yeah, so I think about that a lot.
So it's the end of your life. Mm-hmm. What's the most honorable thing that somebody could say about you?
He was a real one. I think that would be it. And I think what that means is that he wasn't perfect, admitted his flaws, but like was on this pursuit of like really being like real in who he was and what he brought and what he knew what he didn't bring, and he allowed others to bring that. And when people got around, they were able to be that. I think that's the mark of someone who, like, your life and your life's calling, I think should, when people get in your vortex, they should literally feel and they should experience that even in their own lives more than they ever would. Like, it's like what I want people to do when they get around me, I want them to be more authentic. Like, it's literally where they're surrounded and they feel like, oh, I can be more myself. Oh, I really can step out and try to do this. And so I think that's kind of what I would say at the end of my life.
What's it like for you when you're sitting with somebody and you're, coaching them, facilitating them, and they make a connection that reveals to them something that's true about who they truly are?
It actually is. I've been in meetings like that where the day's been really difficult and I felt it in my body. And it's like, and when I've worked with somebody and they've made that connection, it's like all pain, stress, whatever, literally leaves, because it's like you have been a part of, like, that's what I feel like I'm supposed to do. So when you're actually able to walk in and unpack your calling right there in that moment, it's just, it's like one of the most encouraging things to watch people like unlock that, because what you realize now is when they unlock that, they're not just unlocking it for the sake of just them. You realize once they get it, who else gets impacted by it? Now, all of a sudden, something that may have been jammed up in their marriage, that thing helps them, or their parenting, or in their family relationships and those who they lead, or so on and so forth. It's like, oh man, you start seeing by them unlocking that, it's so many more people will be impacted if they stay the course and do the hard work. Because it's different to get the revelation, like, oh, I see where this comes from. It's a whole different thing. It's like, okay, how did I get there? And then whenever that thing, now, okay, how do I apply this? What do I have to do? And thinking deep about it. And it's just work. And I think sometimes the people who do it, they just get better. But most people, and again, most people, they struggle because it gets worse before it gets better. Because all of a sudden, when you're ignorant, ignorant is bliss because you didn't feel it. Now all of a sudden you're starting to feel stuff, and you're like, and it just brings out a bunch of stuff, and you're like, well, when I was like ignorant, man, it was kind of like cool, you know what I'm saying? But I tell people, if you ever want to start the journey of authenticity, like, understand what you're asking for. Because sometimes, man, it's just like, yeah, it sucks for a little bit, but I will tell you, on the other side of it, it's really, really cool knowing you can walk in that.
Why is getting to guide people towards those connections so powerful to you?
Because I believe that is how humanity was meant to be. I don't believe you will become fully authentic on this side of eternity. My actual, my worldview, I don't believe that. Like, you'll be fully authentic. I believe you'll get closer. I think you have the ability to get closer and closer, and a lot of people don't even scratch the surface. But I actually believe that was the original intent of humans. I believe that when God made humans, it was to live that way. When you read the Bible, it says they were naked and they were unashamed. I think in their full essence of who they were, it was just like, it just wasn't about not wearing clothes. It was the fact that there was no hidden parts of them. There's no hidden motives. There was no hidden parts of their skill set and their ability. They could just be fully them. And I think that's what is the original intent. So I believe that, like, my job is to help us get as close as we can on this side to the original intent. But the broken parts of us always wants to hide and cover and to do those things. And whenever you hide and cover, those things really don't ever go well for you.
Where do you still feel ashamed?
Hmm. I think I feel shame in like it's interesting, and I think in what I was talking about earlier, like some of my emotionality because I have lows, and I know that impacts people around me. Right? I know it impacts Wendy. I know it can impact my kids. They're, as we talked earlier, they're getting older, so they can tell when I'm not like in a great space. So I think that's where sometimes I feel shame because, like, as you know, as a husband, as a father, you want to always set the example. Um, but what I've tried to remind myself is setting the example to to my kids are like, yeah, these are not like propping up some fake like, oh yeah, everything's great, da da da, and then but like no, like it's okay for them to see the struggle because it's life. Because when they go through the struggle, they understand like, oh yeah, this is like not like like this is normal, and it's part of it because it's gonna be part of their DNA. So I think I can still feel shame in that. And I think I still can feel shame sometimes in like my drive to want to. I think sometimes I see what people can be and what they can go through. Being this futurist or like Erwin Nance being a maven, like I just don't see reality. I see it a different way. And so when I see people can be something else and they don't want to be that, I can push that, and it just pisses me off because I'm just like, why wouldn't you want to do this? But I think I can get shamed because sometimes it just frustrates me so much, and I get so frustrated with the person because I'm like, why wouldn't you want to like be this? Why do you just want to go with the status quo of what everything else is? But I realized that like it's just the call. It's what God's actually called me to. So sometimes I think I feel shame because I just get so angry at times in moments like that. So those are a couple things.
With the hope being that you can empower people to live more authentically, and yet there are places where you still feel ashamed at areas that are authentic to who you are. Does it ever make you feel like a fraud?
Yeah, for sure. But I think that being a fraud is, I think one of the things about being a fraud is when you aren't willing to recognize or don't know where you are actually a fraud at. I think we all have things that we still like cover, and we're just on this journey of consistently trying to uncover those things. So yeah, you can feel that way. And that's when I tell people. And I think, but here's what that does though. It always keeps me in a place of humility because now that pride can creep in of like, man, I'm just more authentic than other people. They don't want to do this. And then you're like, well, no, there are still parts of my life that I cover. And so I think that in that, it just always reminds me of like, no, there's still this journey to go. And that it's just literally, it's just been like a grace that's allowed me to even be more authentic than what I was. It's been gifts that God's put in my life. You know what I mean? Like people like a Dr. Zoda who he put in my life, about almost 13 years ago. And just that gift, it was through a random connection through somebody on Twitter who was a pastor in town who I just was like, oh man, he did some great, and I knew he went through some stuff. I sat and met with him, and then he said, oh man, this guy saved my life. And I called him, and it was just kind of like, and then just watching how me and his friendship have grown over the years. But it's like, man, that was just a random reaching out to somebody on Twitter to then do that. And you're like, man, that was a gift. And so I just try to remind myself a lot of times that it's just been a gift and grace of where I'm at. And so to keep myself in the right posture, but also sometimes not to go too deep into the place of feeling like a fraud, but also like not getting where you're too inflated. I'm just better than the next person.
Is there anything that people pay you to do that you add a ton of value to throughout your daily life, but when you try to apply that skill set in some of your closest relationships, like your friendships or at home, it just doesn't stick the same way?
Absolutely. One thing you listen, your greatest gift many times, your greatest gift won't really work like in some of your closest relationships.
Why
until
so?
later. I don't, it's
Until later. Until later.
I think until later because I think what happens, I think the motivation behind it is what the key is. Because if you really think about it, like when people come to me, the best results happen to people who recognize there's a problem and they want help. versus you live with the person, you live with the people, you see their problems, and then your anxiety wants to fix it. I think that's why it doesn't work, because I think the motivation behind it isn't, yeah, it is part of it. I want you to be better, but the other part is, man, this is going to alleviate the pain you're causing me because of your lack of awareness or your whatever. And so I have learned that some of the best times is when those things happen. It makes me have to deal with what's happening internally to me. And then if I'm willing to trust the process of it, that in due time, those conversations come up. In due time, they have to. And that's what's hard, because everyone has to walk through their process, and everyone has their own like different types of gifts and skills. And so like, for me, like, I'm going to get to the basement of things. I can see it quick. I can do that. For others, it may take them a little bit longer. But then they have other skill sets that I'm like, I don't even recognize that they see, you know what I mean? That you wish you were there a little bit faster. So, yeah. So, I mean, I've seen it a lot where people come in, they have a skill set, and it's like the one thing they do like great. It's like, you're like, oh, I can help you. And it's like the people who are closest to you are like, because they see you all the time. But I've also think that's just a new thought for me. I just was like, I think it's the motivation. I think when people are trying to apply their skill set, it's out of their anxiety. And what I've learned within my family and with my friends, when I take a step back, I'm just like, all right, I'll let it go through and let them wrestle and do whatever. Then what tends to happen, they come to you like, hey, what about this? What about this? What about this? And also, here's the thing. They've known you the longest. So it's like, you know, it's like in the Bible, right? It's like Jesus wasn't welcome in his own hometown. And I don't think he wasn't welcome in his own hometown because they're, you know, I think they're familiar and they're used to that. They're like, oh yeah, that's just such and such. You know what I'm saying? Like, people can get around you and it's like, oh yeah, that's just Bree. And they're used to certain things. But then when you get in certain environments, people be like, oh man, like the level of wisdom she has for her age. It's like, but people are so used to, you know what I mean? Like that. And then you know how it is. You have all other types of stuff. You have family dynamics. You could have jealousy. You have whatever. So all that stuff goes into it too. I have questions for you now. Here we go.
Dun, dun, dun.
I know. If you could magically wave a wand and fix one thing about you, what would it be?
Okay, Rick Rubin. We like Rick Rubin's interview style.
Yeah, his
so
interview
we've been
style
obsessed
is
with that
really
recently.
good, yeah. With Matthew McConaughey.
We did enjoy that interview. Yeah. If I had a magic wand, I could fix one thing about me. A big problem that I have is there's like this massive chasm, I think, between who I am and how I express myself at levels. Whether it be like, you know, I'm like, we're in rooms with clients and like there are very specific components of like my personality, the way that I talk, like the tone of my voice, like things like that are so habitual to, you know, alter and adjust. And you can always validate it, like, well, you know, professionalism. I also like, I do value wisdom. So there is wisdom in like, I'm going to listen more than I'm going to talk. So things that are true that I can validate to a further extreme because I'm so scared of being, I think, misunderstood or criticized for my convictions or even wisdom that I do have and not being accepted. And I think that, I mean, it can be, and I mean, super simple stuff, like where even if we're in a meeting here and it's like, hey, like you looked like you weren't like interested, like what, you know, what was going on. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like that is not, you know, what was happening at all. So I have this chasm that's there that I think out of like fear of being perceived poorly, I kind of self-fulfill the prophecy and set myself up to be perceived wrongly, or not in a way that's quite accurate. And it can always be the excuse for why I'm, you know, not at a certain point or whatever that might be, or misunderstood. And I wouldn't say not at a certain point, but a more specific term would be a reason for why I'm misunderstood or feel misunderstood.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting you say that because there are moments where you're like, man, like in wisdom, part of your personality like can't come out, right? Like, here's the truth about it. Like, I was listening to Tim Ross just even earlier today, and he was talking about this. He was talking about like, and I wrestle with this. Like, you know, he gave the example of President Obama, and let's look at this. He's like, President Obama's a black man. Let me again, like President Obama 100% uses the N-word. There's no doubt in my brain, but like he's like the president of the American people, right? So he can't just be like, hey, what's up, my niggas? Like he can't do that.
There's
like
proper containment.
Yeah. And so there's like wisdom in being able to do that. But there's also the reality too, where sometimes it's like, no, the proper, like being you is needed. So, you know what I mean? And I think sometimes it's the motive. I always keep going back to, it really does come down to, I believe, the motivation of why. Whether if it's fear, you know, or just like sometimes even like, no, or even sometimes like your anger. Man, I'm just going to be who I am. I don't care what anybody thinks about me. I'm just going to keep it real. And you're like, nope, that's not fueled out of you being authentic. That's fueled out of you're pissed off about something that you were suffocated for so long. Now you're like, I don't care whatever environment I'm in. And I'm like, that's not the right motivation, because I believe the right motivation should be coming into a place and being you because of that's value. And I think that's how people ask the question all the time, like, how do I become more authentic? And I'm like, when you go into a room, add value. Add the most value you can. And I think sometimes that's like me. That's like, you know, this, you've been there. Sometimes that's me being an absolute, like, it would feel like I am a jerk to people because of how direct I am. But I do that because I feel like that's the most value I can add right there in that moment, even if the people can't see that. Sometimes it's not saying anything, you know what I mean? And so I think the motivation is actually there. What do you do to try to shrink that gap, though?
Well, you know, part of the problem is that I don't. That's why I would love for a magic wand to just, you know, fix it for me. I wouldn't say 100% of the time that I don't. It's something that I've been thinking about more on what I can do towards it, because I guess the origin of the chasm is because you have to have self to like be self. So for majority, I've spent more of my life not having any sense of, like, it's very muted, very dull. If you ask me what I like I don't really know, like, so I had to spend a lot of time unearthing many things that were like, you know, buried alive. And so I still kind of feel that, like, well, now that I have it, like, I don't know what to do with my hands, you know? I don't know what to do. Like, I don't know what to do with my hands.
Yep.
So there's like an awkwardness to, you know, how to move, because it still feels, there are things that are true that still feel like fraudulent, or imposter type, whether it's like, oh, leading a room. And my like view of self is so off in compared to what is like a true proper view. And so what I usually fall back towards is like, I'm so internal, and part of our culture is also very internal, to look inward, and there's a benefit of that. So I'm very practiced in like, okay, what are the things that I don't accept? What is it right now? Like, what's the lie? What's the lie right now that I'm believing that actually isn't true, but because I'm believing it, it's changing my facial expressions, the way that I move my hands, the way that I sit, like my ideas. It's limiting my like mental ability to think. Like, I try to think through that and get to the deeper why. But on the other side, there is some times where it's just like, I don't need to think about that anymore. You know what I mean? Like, I've thought about that. Like, I know that this is a recurring pattern. Like, what am I going to do to change it? So I don't know if I have the clear answer would be that I do think a lot about the deeper whys and the lie that's there, what's actually true. I live so ambivalently because I value wisdom. So I value the gray. So I can always make the case for the other side to keep me kind of center. For example, like, there might be a time where it's wise for me to seek affirmation, but my jump thought is like, oh, I need to talk to somebody. I need to ask them what they think for them to tell me. And then I think like, yeah, but shouldn't I know how to do that on my own at a level? So then I'll go to the other, like, maybe this is one of those times where I just need to remind myself. And then it will be a time where my jump my starting thought is, oh, I need to remind myself, and I'm like, oh, but we're made to exist within community, so maybe I should go out. And so I can kind of loop in some of the practical things to do too, because of the value of wisdom, where I can always see a list of good options. Usually my gut tells me the better option of the good options, but then I can convince myself of why the other things are also good.
No, and I think that, like, and that may be something we should talk about at some point on the pod, of like, how do you know the idea of like authenticity, right? As we talk about self-awareness, resilience, remain self-aware and empowerment, but like authenticity, being yourself, you know, whatever the language people want to use today. It's the idea of how do you know when to like to be authentic, how to do that in different rooms. Because I think a lot of times, like what you're saying, it's like, you're like, okay, well, this is what's going on here, but I really need to speak up here. But then there's times where you're like, no, I really need to listen here. And then you're wrestling through, okay, well, I need to speak up. And then you're like, okay, well, internally, what's going on in me? I don't feel like, okay, am I going to sound dumb if I say this? I already feel like they're looking at me a certain way because of my age or whatever it may be. And I think that those are just ways, but I think we just live in extremes and we don't live in nuance. You know what I mean? And I think that's what you're building right now, is you're building that ability to live in nuance of like, yep, sometimes I need to do this, sometimes I don't. And that just takes time and practice. You know what I mean? And so that's why when we're in rooms sometimes, I'm like, I'll just literally be sitting there. I'm like, hey, Brisa, what do you think? And it's just not because I know you sat there and you've thought about what's going on. And so I'm like, oh no, there's probably something. And a lot of times I've watched you to where when I ask you that question, majority of the time, it's like really good stuff you add. And so it's like, you know, my thing to continue to keep encouraging is like to understand, like when you're feeling that or understand, like, you know, like, oh, yep, when I remember when he asked me this and I gave a feedback and it was right. Trying to remember what that feeling was, you know, like, oh yeah, like, you know, for me it is when somebody says something, it's like there's something internally I feel. I'm like, oh, and now I've learned over years that usually that's the right thing to say. And so, but I think it's just a hard thing to literally live this way. That's why I tell people to live like, you know, like authentic life. It's just a lot of work. But I think one of the things I'll end here is I thought that you have done a great job of is that the reason why you want to know self, you talk about the idea they're able to show yourself, you have to really know self, because it's not just for self, it's for the betterment of those around you. And I think that is the fundamental thing today that people are missing. People are doing deep dives into self for their own personal happiness, their own personal goals, but you don't hear people living and doing it for the betterment of others. And I think when you don't, there's a limit. You can become aware, but now you have to take what you know to real life to serve others. And then, you know, you get to bump up against all the other stuff. It actually cements more and more who you are as you actually take that gift to go give it to other people. And I think that's the whole point of what we're trying to do through leadership, authenticity, whatever, is how people do that. So sweet. I appreciate you. Last thing, you're going on Thanksgiving. So what's your favorite dish?
Ooh, I don't know. I like them all. I love mac and cheese, but I think that I'll probably say corn casserole.
Corn casserole. Lauren, our producer behind the scene, what about you? You're about to say something super white, so go ahead.
Or she's going to be like, well, I grew up in China, so I didn't celebrate Thanksgiving.
I didn't say Thanksgiving, so, you know.
I like green beans, just plain green beans.
Yeah, exactly what I said, very white. She likes vegetables.
Fair enough.
My favorite food is broccoli.
What'd you say?
One of my favorite foods is just
Me too. I love broccoli.
I do like.
I'm with you.
I didn't love broccoli growing up until I married Wendy and her mom, Mimi.
Yeah.
Mimi's broccoli is
It's
just
good.
yeah. I'll just walk. She'll sometimes like drop food over the house and it'll just be sitting there. I'm just like, it's like literally walking by it.
Well, I'll be like,
yeah, we're constantly just picking the pot up. We're not even putting it on the plate. We're just walking by.
Eating broccoli.
Yeah. No, what I'm really looking forward to is Corey and Tasha. Their cornbread.
I was gonna say, wait, I forgot. Like, are you gonna have Thanksgiving food? But I forgot you.
Yeah, me and Jay are gonna go with Corey and Tasha. So what's interesting? because you were like, oh man, Tasha's cornbread thing. So I said something to Corey about it, and Corey was like, he got like offended. I'm like, what are you offended by? He's like, dude, that's my recipe.
Yeah.
I'm like, I was like, what? I was like, what? I was like, I'm thinking this
You've
whole
been
time.
talking about Tasha's cornbread for a long time.
Yeah, I have. He's
Not
like, nah,
Corey's.
dude. He's like, it's mine because it's like this honey roll stuff, honey butter, whatever I put on it. I'm like, I was like, whatever it is, I was like, just like make sure we got
Send it to me.
I was like, just make sure we got it when we come over. So I texted, we like right before we got on. He's like, hey man, are you coming over? I'm like, yeah. It's like, I'm about to go to the store. And I was like, and this is when you got good friends. I was like, all right, just let me know what I need to bring. And he was like, man, just bring your appetite, man. Just come hang out. I'm like, oh man, this is amazing.
Aww.
So that's when you have like really good friends. Like we used to always do different things like that together.
Yeah.
And that was the fun thing. Like when you're an adult, like we go over there, you eat, and it's like when you got really good friends, like as adults, like you can go to their house and like sleep. Like I mean, literally, we go hang out, and I'm like, yeah, man, like the guest room, like we're just there, like it's a full day event, to go over there. So yeah, I like it. It's exciting. So anyway, hope you have a good Thanksgiving, Lauren. Hope you have a good Thanksgiving, guys. I hope you out there again
had a good Thanksgiving.
You had it, yes. You had a good Thanksgiving, guys. This probably be a couple weeks after. So hey, you know what? You may want to cook some extra Thanksgiving food, like on December 7th or something like that. But anyway, until next time, keep writing the rules.